But I just think that's an interesting talking point that nobody's brought up in a while. And somebody like Kelvin Gastelum, to me, screams 175er. What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
So, Nick, we had a week off. No UFC this past weekend. If you can believe that, it literally seems like every weekend is another card. And so I think we get spoiled in that way when we're off a weekend. We're like, what are we going to do with ourselves on Saturday night?
I know.
But this coming Saturday, we've got a great main event. We've got two guys at 185 who are trying to reclimb the ladder. Kelvin Gastelum, Jared Cannonier.
Yeah.
The thing that really pops off the page to me here is the fact that Jared Cannonier fought at heavyweight until 2016. Kelvin spent the large part of his earlier career at 170. The limits for those weight classes are damn near 100 pounds apart, 95 pounds to be specific. So you have to think that size might come into play here, especially to Jared Cannonier's advantage.
Yeah, maybe less size and more strength. I think that there's a big difference between what Jared Cannonier used to carry around as a body and what Kelvin Gastelum carries around. Kelvin is still a 170er. He just has a hard time making the weight and doesn't really like to do weight cutting. It works out for him. He doesn't need to be at 170, but his body type is for sure a 170 frame.
Sure. Yeah.
And you said last week and we didn't have any fights, which is so true. But, we had like the PFL and Bellator stuff, and that was great. But it's different when there's not a UFC card on. But when the UFC comes back, they always come back strong. And Kelvin Gastelum is always in awesome fights. He's always putting on just like epic performances, giving Izzy like the hardest fight he had of his career, at 185, and like really epic performances. So I think this is going to be a really crazy fight. Kelvin is super technical, super good with his striking, with his stand-up, and his grappling is underrated. His wrestling and all that stuff is underrated. But when you're talking about a guy like Jared Cannonier who fills out the 185 limit about as well as you can, his body transformation is insane. What he did when he went from 265, or he was somewhere around there, he carried a lot of fat. Now he doesn't carry any fat. He has one of the best bodies in the UFC, I think. And so it's going to be crazy to see somebody who, in my opinion, is probably a lot stronger and more physically daunting than Kelvin Gastelum. But, this is the game of weight classes. And if you can both make the weight, then you're technically both in the same weight class and you can have a fight. So I'm excited to see how this one turns out.
Me too, and I think you're absolutely right. If you want to put a notch in the strength bucket, that's for Jared Cannonier for sure. But what we know when people really trim down a lot and cut a lot of weight, don't carry a lot of body fat, is they usually give up a notch in the cardio bucket. Yeah. And when your opponent is Kelvin Gastelum, you almost always certainly give up a notch in the cardio bucket. I really don't know who's going to win this fight. I mean, Jared Cannonier was on a streak until and it looked like him and Izzy were on a collision course until Robert Whittaker shut that down in his last fight. And Kelvin's been that guy that's just been win one, lose two, win three, lose one. And he's always in discussions. He's always there, but he's never quite been able to eclipse the top. I don't know if you remember this, but for your birthday many years ago, we saw him fight on the undercard against Tyron Woodley, and that was when Tyron was on his way to becoming prime T-Wood, and it was a split decision, and that was the Silva Diaz fight back in 2015. So, I mean, he's been around fighting the best guys for a long time, and what's he, 29 years old now? 2015, he would have been very early 20s, and so he still has a lot of fight left in him. I personally think that the weight could be cut properly. I think that he just, like you said, he doesn't really like it. He doesn't really want to do it. And I can respect that. But I really think that Kelvin could have his best run at being a champion if he could get to that 170. I mean, he's fighting the best guys at 185 and giving them hell. He gave Izzy hell. I mean, if you talk about people that are reasonable opponents for a rematch against Izzy, I know Kelvin's not up there in the rankings, but if you just want to take the performance as it was, Kelvin gave him his toughest fight. Yeah, and after a while, if Izzy keeps cleaning out the division over and over again, Kelvin's going to get another shot. And I think it'll probably be another competitive fight. He just has a style to match up well with Izzy. And I think that Kelvin, even though 170 would probably be better for him as far as getting a title shot,
I don't know if he has a better chance against the guys that are at the very, very top of 170, just stylistically. I think him being a little bit faster, giving up a little bit of size for a little bit of speed and cardio is what helps him at 185. I think some of those guys at 185 carry a little bit too much weight. They're a little bit slower than him, and that 15-pound difference between 170 and 185 is where a big speed difference comes into play.
Yeah.
Kelvin's pretty fast, even though he doesn't look like the most physically athletic guy. He's pretty fast, and he can beat those guys to the punches. We saw him do it with Michael Bisping. You've seen him just get off on guys, and you're like, whoa, he's moving at a much faster pace than them. And a lot of times when you think about MMA, size does play a role, but speed also plays a role. When you can leverage your speed the way he can, you can be pretty successful. So if it's up to me, I would say Kelvin, stay where you're at 185 because he's doing well there, and he's probably capable of getting as far at 185 than he is at 170, and the quality of life goes up. He doesn't have to suffer as much in fight camp. He can enjoy himself. He can train probably a little bit harder and not worry about weight cutting. So I like him at 185. This fight's going to be pretty interesting because if he can beat Cannonier, then there's nobody that's going to be physically more trouble for him at 185 than Cannonier. And
maybe
I think
Costa, but that's a maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And so those are the reasons I think maybe it's best for him to stay at 185. And if he gets this win, which I think I'm kind of leaning towards him to get the win, then he's right in the right place.
Yeah, we haven't talked a long time about adding weight classes. That seemed to be all the craze
for a while.
A year ago. I mean, you couldn't turn on an MMA channel on YouTube or ESPN or wherever they were talking about MMA, read about it in an article where they weren't discussing adding weight classes, right. 165, 175, 185, 225. I was for it. Not all of them, but I could see having a 155, 165, 175, 185. And I personally believe that if they did have that, Kelvin would be a front runner for the 175 belt.
Yeah.
And I think that would make some very interesting matchups. You obviously would move Kamaru up as the champion of 175. But I just think that's an interesting talking point that nobody's brought up in a while. And somebody like Kelvin Gastelum, to me, screams 175er.
Yeah.
Like Kevin Lee screams 165er.
Yeah.
I think that Gastelum is the same way for 75. So just an interesting thing there. But as far as this fight goes, I actually am leaning a bit towards Cannonier. I think he came out a bit flat against Whitaker. He didn't do enough. He was a little bit... I guess the right word is he was a little hesitant at times, and he kind of was watching the fight rather than participating in it.
Yeah.
I think he's gone back and corrected those things in his camp. He's getting used to that frame still at 185, and I expect him to be sharper and faster and, of course, stronger. The only question is his cardio going to hold up? And I'm going to say it is. I'm going to pick Cannonier to win. A tough decision because unless you've got like a sledgehammer hidden in your shorts, you're pretty much not taking Kelvin out.
Yeah, I think that's a good, smart prediction. For some reason, maybe it's the week off that's making me feel this, but I feel like they're going to come back with a bang, and Kelvin Gastelum always shocks the world, when you least expect it. So I'm actually going to go with an early finish for Kelvin. I think he's going to get it done with like a TKO. He's just going to try to get his footing back in under him and try to make something happen at 185. The division's kind of open for him to do it right now. Obviously he's got to win a couple of fights, but I think this is a good place for him to go ahead and start. And it's not going to be easy, but I think he might catch Cannonier early and then bring too much of a storm for him to handle.
Interesting. Well, it's going to be a great fight.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Well, guys, thanks so much for watching our video. Let us know in the comments, who do you think is going to win this fight? We always enjoy chatting with you guys there. And a like and subscribe is always appreciated if you've enjoyed this video. And if you listen to audio podcasts, check us out there as well, the Barnhill Brothers Audio Podcast. Until the next time, guys, have a wonderful day.
Peace.